Greetings to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Maui, the occupied islands known as Hawaii by the United States. Today, August 31st, 2021. Today's talk, a challenging topic about fear, facing fear, the ideal of fearlessness, diving into this topic, and personalize it. May I invite you to personalize it, and whatever words may resonate with you, to bring them into that intimate edge of your own heart and experientially apply them based upon your own integrity, your own purpose, your own Dhamma, your Dharma. I hope you're well today. Fear. On one level, it's so aberrant to my sensibilities that we even must deal with it, that it exists, that violence exists, that terror exists, that calamity exists, that the unexpected exists, that the land that we sit on and walk on is the site of an active volcano that could explode or erupt at any given second, that we live in a world where uncertainty is the fabric of everything. Impermanence, and it has a razor sharp, jagged edge, to state the obvious. And so my point is, fear is so, for me, I can only speak for me, fear is so embedded in the fabric of reality, of the reality of being in context to realities of other beings, that it's so personal. It's like, it's so intimate. Fear is so intimate. And I think that's what I'm trying to get to here in the earliest stages of this sharing is to make it a vocation, a sacred endeavor. I guess you could say that about everything, but make the exploration to become more familiar with the faces of fear as a sacred activity, not so much to overcome it, but to coordinate with it our limitations. We do have limitations. They reveal to us the definitions of our mind, our body, our life, our imagination, our ideals, and push us into that crazy dynamic called the uniqueness of your own being. Frail, large, vulnerable, beautiful, all the ways that we describe the theatrics, the musicality, the poetry of consciousness embodied in body. And so fear is so natural to the habitat of existence. I mean, really, someone is fearless? Like, regardless, you will live free or die? Really? Everyone's on, the boat on the shore of Normandy with a lifespan of what? 19 seconds, live or die in freedom to support the great vision of freedom. It's a radical, existential ambition to even use the word F-E-A-R and to want to meditatively understand it. I think there we go. Understanding the machinations of fear, rather than fear or fearlessness, and trying to live in the puppetry of one or the other. So I'm really in the school of the humble adventurer, the wounded, perpetually traumatized warrior, frail. Let me pause right there. I'm so down with the embrace. I'm so there with the inclusivity of that too. The embrace, the inclusivity. I see you, I feel you, I want to understand you, fear. No, it's okay. I'm not going to impose upon you an arrow of idealism and say, vanquish, vanquish, ghost, illusion, phantasm, hallucination. No. Splinters are real. Root canals are mandatory with serious infections. Wars go on. There is rape. There is terror. There are torture victims. I've been sacredly terrorized, having interviewed over 200 former detainees, political prisoners in the country of Burma. Many of them are back in prison at this moment being tortured. And what is it like in those prison cells to, one, confront the apparatus of terror, deprivation of sleep and medicines and food and intimacies and sanitation, the anticipation of the ongoingness of that, the fear of that, and then the actual events of torture. How do you deal with that? I've come away in the most humble way, paraphrasing my experiences collectively with these brilliant women and men who've endured through conscience and belief to be incarcerated. They did it out of conscience. That it's an all-inclusive event. There's never the absence of fear, but how able are you to coexist with fear and simultaneously at times, I'm told, and in my own humble way, choose not to be frightened enough to prevent you from an action that you know, as Aung San Suu Kyi has said in a famous quote, not letting fear prevent you from doing that which you know is right, knowing what is right. And so a lot of me facing fear is the word right. How do I embed and root more intimately in reality, the rightness of reality? For example, I use the word anicca, impermanence, quite a bit. And many of you know that some months back I was diagnosed with an acutely enlarged aortic aneurysm, the largest vessel in the human body leaving the heart, and by a number of different prominent medical professionals, the overall prognosis was either you undergo extremely dangerous surgery like right now, or you must live with a ticking bomb with a short fuse. You will die. And if you are away from emergency rooms, like being out here in Hawaii, they told me before I left, and the cardiac doctor that I have here on the island, don't even call 911. You cannot be saved. So that is some fear. There's some fear there, but no, not really. My point is that facing reality rightly, it's impermanent. All of our days are numbered. Okay? Hello, what's new with the reality of anicca vata sankhara, all conditioned phenomena? You and me, the air, the food, the memory, the conditioning, the rent, the mortgages, the intimacies, all the various things that constitute existence is a temporal fabric of infinite causal factors that are a dancing photonic collage of impermanence. You and me. We're like hallucination bubbles on this fabric of photons. Seemingly so. The Buddhist texts refer to it as a hallucination set of bubbles or foam, empty of centrality. It's like if I want to really dive into the reality of that rightness and go, you so do not exist, and at the same time, you so do exist at the confluence of existence with reality. With your narratives of reality, rightly or wrongly, therein lies, do we have fear or fearlessness in any given moment? How mindful am I of ultimate realities versus conditioned realities? Like this aneurysm, for example, after the initial shock, it was like, okay, you've been in the Buddhist framework of thinking and feeling and meditating now for nearly 5 decades. Finally, on a very real level, now you can embrace a reflection back to you that you will die. There's something absurd about it that, okay, great, I can cry about it, I can fear it. No. But for me personally, and it's grown into this incredible gift, I don't say this with any great sense of courage, but I feel like I've been befriended by God, befriended by the Buddha. I've been given a heavenly messenger so central to existence that it's my very heart. And there's something so splendid in knowing that I've got this embedded aneurysm of the aorta. It's like it's a life-giving mantra, not a life-taking illness. And it's just an attitudinal shift. And so I guess my point here is fear and facing fear is so rooted in not circumstances, but in attitude. Attitude. I mean, I encourage you to encourage me, to encourage our friends. Get a hold of your heart, literally and metaphorically, and dive into the renovation, the re-enchantment of your 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 most predominant attitudinal thought, feeling streams. Know them. Mortality is inbuilt not into life, but into every nanosecond of every breath. And the more intimately we abide in the reality of reality rightly, mindfully, consciously, and I say these with tremendous humility and modesty, because it means something different for everyone, we get to wrestle and play and dance with the angel of continuity. Hello, no. You cannot count on tomorrow. You can't even count on today. And pretty soon the mandates will come where if you don't get vaxxed every 13 seconds of your life forever, you will never buy another morsel of food at the health food store, at Whole Foods. You won't even be able to put petrol into your car. Your whole body will need to be masked. We'll put you in plastic saran wrap and just tuck you away so that you don't contaminate even your own next rebirth. I mean, there's something so Fellini-like, so crazy in this Monty Python-esque, dark, somewhat comedic satire called Existence. That another thing for me around fear is to learn to inhabit the radical humor, if you will, of how crazy existence can be and is. I mean, this is really high pornography at the moment, or I should say deadbeat pornography, because the pornographers right now, the mayor, say no more about my ship is out to sea. Biden. You can hardly imagine the world can get more crazy. And you know it's coming. And so what we can do is either buy into, play into, as if we're actors on a shared stage of narration. Let me say what I don't really want to think and say. Or you can decathex. This is a very big point for me. And I think a lot of us are getting to there. Pull yourself out of the pandemic. Call it endemic. I'm done. I'm done with your pornography. I'm pulling out. I'm pulling out my narrations on why you should not get vaccinated. No, I'm pulling out my narrations on why I don't need to participate in the pornography of fear. Fear, fear, fear. I fear, frankly, driving my car to the beach. 11 miles, to me, of sustained, paralyzed horror. Cars are zipping by. I've been walking in Bali, walking in LA, walking in Vancouver, walking in a monastery, walking in Rangoon. I prefer walking. And hurtling at 60, 70 miles an hour with these massive four-wheel vehicles and drunk tourists on a combination of fear, pakalolo, and bad alcohol, weaving in and around the roads, and all of a sudden you're going, holy shit, any second. I've had car accidents. They suck. I have more fear driving than I do getting the Delta strain or dying through my aneurysm. It's all so unthinkably relative. Attitude. Understanding the faces of fear. Knowing the power of choice is always in your heart. I remember back in the day when I was in the jungle of Burma with my very dear friend, a former Vietnam vet. And we were in an outpost, and all of a sudden, he heard the familiar sound, which was unfamiliar to me, of high altitude jet aircraft. And he looked up. He said, we're under attack. And I immediately knee-jerked to run, as if going somewhere was going to help resolve the dilemma of the fear of death or shrapnel. And he just grabbed me by the shoulder and says, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to go hide. He said, clearly you've never been in war before. You can't hide from rocket attacks. It's better to be in the open. Therefore, you can save your body with a multiplicity of 1,000,000 splinters. And I went, logic, knee-jerk, habit. And it was like so amazing to be guided by an outside force of restraint and wisdom and practicality and reality. And I think that's the same thing that we must encourage in ourselves. Who's going to grab your shoulder and say, hey, stay put? Running ain't going to avoid the problem. And he whipped out a pack of cigarettes. I was smoking at the time. And we literally lit up a cigarette and had an invigorating, he's a beautiful mind, a beautiful conversation in the midst. And it wasn't some big thunderstorm of rockets. There was enough to do some damage, but the lesson was well placed in my soul. So, fear, I want to use the word naturalize. There's something about courage and inclusivity and normalizing the innate topography of consciousness in context. Greed, anger, delusion, fear. My friend who passed away also, Robert Chardoff, the amazing film producer of so many Hollywood hits and brilliant films, and a beautiful mind, dear friend of mine. Many of you know I married he and his wife in 1990. He was one of my best male friends on planet Earth. He passed away 4 years ago. And I remember him attending one of my retreats in Ojai. It must have been in 1983 or 84. And I was giving one of my idealistic raves about overcoming greed, overcoming fear, overcoming anger, overcoming delusion. And I then opened it up to questions. And he says, Alan, do you realize that you're mad? And I haven't never really been asked that question before. I know I'm mad, but I've never had anyone reflect back to me my madness, especially in context to my prolific respect for Buddhist psychology and the idealism of overcoming loba dosa moha, greed, anger, and delusion. And I so am down with that idealism. But the point was, and we got to talk about this over the course of the next several decades, is gradation. Befriending fear is not becoming fearless. Naturalizing, normalizing, without giving up the invigoration of courage and challenge and non-complicity with these denigrating states of mind, they can be. But they're going to be around for a while. For those of you who are proudly teaching and guides to enlightenment, well, guess what? You're wrong. Humanize the soil of your heart and mind. You're just in denial of your sexuality, your fear, and you're embedded in the paralysis of dogma and idealism. That's what Bob was saying to me. You're mad. Mad is being drunk in the ideology and the blind adherence, if you will, to dogma, to ideals, to unrealistic expectations, developmental, transformational, and purely biblical in terms of just the structure of eternity as we can see it here on the world stage. Physics, LSD, meditation. So to humanize, but equally hone the warrioress in us. Humanize the topography of encounter with obstacles, and know the faces, the characteristics, the manifestations, the narrations, the energetics, the frequencies, the waves, the particles, the smell, the taste, the fabric, the ooze, the sharpness, the deadening numbness of fear. Know all of those facets, study them. Just like when we go to a dentist and we have an abscess and he or she asks us, do we want nitrous or Novocaine or both? And suddenly you take nitrous and you just go, wow, where did the pain go? Where did the fear go? Where did the anticipation of being drilled on without nitrous, or a numbing effect, an illuminating effect? So there is a relativity here to this whole process, is that fear, we have to be our own kind of nitrous oxide, if you will, in the face of it. And it may not be the quantity that we want, but we've got to empower the courage to at least challenge it and to courageously engage it And right there, rather than fear or fearlessness, this is my approach, is the high heart art of learning. No matter how bad it gets, no matter how dark it gets, no matter how problematic it gets, no matter how convulsive, if I've learned and I'm learning and I continue to keep learning something there, yes, absence of fear, absence of pain, just get the damn tooth out. Just, hey, listen, I want out of the relationship. Don't leave me. You know, it's never going to be one way or the other. We're going to have to constantly deal with these issues, is how to courageously engage it, to normalize it, to increase the courage to keep what? Learning. Learning is the Dhamma. Learning is the evolution of consciousness in context. Learning is the high art of the cosmos. I mean, if we had learned the nature of nature, I don't know why we would be in a world where there is fear, greed, and delusion, rape, genocide, and war. I don't want to normalize that. So there's a part of me, when I deal with fear, is I kick into what I call my existential rebel. I'm not down with being one with a sociopathic eternity. I am not comfortable being fused with the bipolar nature of the cosmos. It's not my problem. I am not in delusion looking at a perfect universe through a stupid filter of humanness. I pride myself on my perspectives, but what I do have in my capacity is deeper levels of courage to confront the madness. And my existential rebel gives me a type of stamina to rise up to the face of the dragon of fear, whether it be mortality, whether it be the perception of loss of property, of how many times you've looked into the mirror of your own reflection and seen something you don't like to see, whether it be a character so-called flaw, the crease of time across the brow, between the eyes, the cheeks of time, the way in which we invest the pornography of cultural propaganda into those wrinkles and call it unbeauty. Just, there's so many ways in which we do not face fear, and we try to create artificial means like fillers. You know, I've got to afford it. I do Botox. To Botox the fear away. Is that a little bit like the vaccine? Can we Botox our way out of violence? Can we vaccinate our way out of the pandemic? Just thinking out loud here. Can we kill our way out of war? Can we steal our way out of poverty? I mean, there's so many ways in which we are wrapped in tight, like an octopus that's grabbed its own body with its 8 tentacles and is squeezing itself for dear life until its head pops up and says, "Hey, you're killing me." And you go, "Oh, I thought you were the enemy." And so we got to be very watchful of how we project the face of fear to be something other than an aspect of one's own consciousness. But that's a very delicate edge to play on, isn't it? Because there are limitations. There are terrifying events in life. But to idealize and to always take it as an aspect of self, man, there is something to be said for the power of spiritual activism towards oneself. At the same time, doing all that we can to challenge and to confront the wrongness of the topography of context. it's a bad design for me that we have a world in which consciousness embodied in various shapes and forms that fly, that swim, and that walk on fours and twos, rape, kill, denigrate, and devour. It's so crazy to really live in nature. I don't know if you've ever done it before. I know I'm kind of being a little bit snarky in saying this, but there was a period for me living in a virgin jungle down in the southern area of Sri Lanka back in the early 80s on a very small island, a 5-acre island in a very large lagoon called Pogastua. Many of you probably have been there, not too far from Dodandua, about 10 miles north of Gal. And there were like 10, 12 cottages there without running water, without electricity. And there was an island for selected monks to live in silence and in study and in meditation. Okay, so I went there with the ideal of pursuing my Dhamma curriculum, my career in study in meditation. I had never lived without electricity. I never lived without running water. Never lived in a virgin forest or jungle. I've been to zoos. I've been in the world. I've traveled many countries, but never really lived in one. And so let me just cut right to the chase. I got there, and it was like, for the first couple of weeks, it was like, wow, I'm like kind of prime food target for animals in this zoo where I'm part of the zoo now. It's like there are vipers that just jump out from anywhere. And the next thing you know, that's dead. These 100, 200 pound, sometimes 5 to 8 feet long, not Komodo dragons, but kobaras that are amphibians that live in the water and live on land, and they're herd consciousness, and they're alpha male to the max. They climb trees, they break legs, they bite, they eat, they're carnivores, and you're in their food chain, and you fuck up, and the next thing you know, they're eating their own kind. And you go like, you damn well better walk around the group of 20 and don't think that there's something that you should do here, like throw a little bit of food to them, because they'll just leap all over you. And you go, I think I need to go back to the urban monastery to study Dharma. This deep jungle immersion is a little bit kind of idealistic for me. And so I really had to acquaint myself with a new dimension of fear. Then you had these incredible, intensely painful flying ants that had some capacity, like jet planes, to see some small target like a drone, but you can just zero in and they would just dive right into your skin and leave these huge boils. And you had to be very watchful when you were outside to cover up and not leave exposed skin, except for your face, of course. And the mosquitoes had dengue fever, they had malaria, and so whenever you were outside, if you stopped, you had to wipe your arms and keep your face moving because you did not want to get dengued or malariaed out. And you're in this inescapable environment. Call it with animals, trees, and nature and jungle, but inescapable sources of fear. Fear, 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 fear. And it's just like the pandemic, this virus now, this little microscopic thing called COVID-19. It's like, it's just unbelievable fear. And all of those ventilators and all, and I'm not taking anything away. It's like this pandemic of fear. And if you buy that narrative of living in this virgin jungle of fear, you can just change the name of all these ways in which we empower fear by labels. Jihad, fear. Donald Trump, really fear. Nuclear war, really fear. Climate exhaustion, sort of fear. The pandemic, fear. Fauci, fear. Wuhan lab, really fear. Xi Jinping, fear. He can put you in prison, seriously fear. Being in Tibet today, keep me away, fear, fear, fear. In Burma, oh my God, fear, paralysis of fear. So much fear. And the world is filled with the noise. No, these are jet planes of fear that some of us live in vicinity of, and others live in the comfort of going to the beach today and going to Whole Foods and getting a good salad and coming home and listening to some music and continuing to write my film on raw war about how to confront the faces of fear and keep alive the courage and the challenge that under any circumstance I refuse to participate in the pornography and the pornographers trying to enlist me into Fear Incorporated. Unless you take a pharmaceutical drug, unless you are willing to die in the name of overcoming fear. It's like, what? It's so crazy. And the way out is Dharma, Dhamma, yoga, meditation, intimacy, family, friendship, the sanity of the soul to understand the ways to engage what I did at the Island Hermitage. And you begin to see that, hey, there's nothing to fear here because you're not separate from nature. You are part of the food chain. Act accordingly. Understand your limits, your boundaries, your sources of shelter, health, therapeutics, and protection. Be smart was a takeaway from me. Be in honor, be in gratitude. Give back to those who have less protection, less support, less medicines. For nearly 7 months, I've been asking the government of my country, the Biden regime, to not invade Burma, but to bring a medical ship to the Bay of Bengal and to show the men and women of that country through direct dana, direct sila, generosity, moral integrity, the gift of medicines, money, and moral support to the democracy activists in that country undergoing a genocide of democracy by the dictator. One of the best ways to confront fear is to support those who have more fear in their lives than you do. There's something about the resilience through compassion and empathy that give that sense of strength. In the monastery at the Pogastu in Island Hermitage, all the monks in silence would support one another. If you got sick, they were right there to wipe your brow, to help you answer the call of nature, to help you bathe if needed to be helped bathing. The gift of service in the face of fear. Let me close today. So many of my friends, I think you know that, are imprisoned in Burma today, including my friend Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, Burma's elected state councillor, the Nobel Peace Laureate, who will be coming to a mock trial early in September by the evil Orwellian military tribunal run by the former general of Burma's army, a man named Min Aung Hlaing, who is now in the footsteps of Pol Pot. No one knows where she is incarcerated. There are 5,000 other men and women, nuns and monks, who are also imprisoned throughout the country of Myanmar, many in undisclosed locations. And I bring this up because these men and women are political prisoners. I bring this up because there are something like 100,000 Afghanis who were intimately involved with the American apparatus for the last 20 years in their country of Afghanistan. Translators, doctors, nurses, teachers, musicians, singers, professors, journalists. They are political prisoners under the evil Taliban. My friend Aung San Suu Kyi and the 5,000 other women and men incarcerated in unknown, undisclosed locations in Burma, along with the 53 million people of the country, are political prisoners held against their will, being forcibly obligated, if you will, to abide by a very violent totalitarian consciousness and behavior. And right now in our world, there's a global pandemic where the machinations of authoritarianism are exceeding the concern for how to skillfully engage COVID-19. And it's as if totalitarianism has become the greater issue more than a global endemic, a pandemic, a virus. And here we are, all political prisoners at the moment. Either you're in collusion with the totalitarians and you're shaming and condemning the so-called vax hesitant or data awake vaccination explorers at adverse effects and are looking for more evidence of its efficacy and its acclaimed therapeutic value in preventing both acquiring the infection, the virus, and transmitting it. Is a war on consciousness right now. It's a spiritual battle. And the pornographers are, to me, gripped by fear. Ming Online in Burma is gripped by fear. I feel that Joseph Biden is gripped by stupidity and fear. I'm saying it right to his face. I think a lot of the sold out career politicians in our government are corrupted by fear. Fear of losing privilege, fear of losing profit, fear of losing all the things that they call their wealth in stuff and status and delusion. They've lost the heart of compassion, of courage, ethical wisdom. And I'm tired on a certain level of taking on my Dharma only to keep improving and transforming my own consciousness. So really here, as I end, at the face of confronting fear is an obligation to those of us in democratic societies to empower the quality of freedom with a type of courageous fearlessness to confront the fearmongers in creative, artistic, musical, sonic, cinematic, literary ways, using our voice, using our hands, isn't just to confront our own fear of infection, fear of a narrowing freedom, but to find an ethical courage to join the warriors of freedom today to turn back for our children, for the future of life itself, for our own sovereignty and our own sanity, learned the activism of courage to confront fear through creative acts of conscience as a force of resilience in overcoming our own fear, which is often, I feel, of unrecognized impotence, of the machinations of collusion, which is a face of fear. And so we fear, we invert, we become smaller. Bob told me that time, you're mad, but you're courageous. You're speaking up. But there's a way to refine that speaking up. And for 30 years, we had a dialogue about that, along with many other things. I've had the same dialogue with Aung San Suu Kyi. We're going to release our audiobook soon, if Audible approves of it. Who knows? The content may be too provocative. But right now, in solidarity with you sisters, in solidarity with you brothers, it is time to challenge the pornographers, the pandemic fearmongers. Don't cower into the corner of a narrowing existence. It's time to stand up, be heard, use your courage, be human, normalize fear, but don't give into it. And do all that we possibly can today to safeguard the sanctity of courage, of conscience, of dignity, and to support our brothers and sisters around the world who are political prisoners, and we ourselves soon to be political prisoners. You may even see that in your own life right now. The politics of the pandemic are out to incarcerate certain elements of people in all societies worldwide if you do not comply with the politics of the pornographers. It is no longer about the virus. It is no longer about safety. It is no longer about a skillful response therapeutically to how to stay healthy, maintain a revolution of sanity. And we're called upon today to state the obvious, to really challenge the faces of fear, to know them, and as Aung San Suu Kyi said, so much more important than fearlessness is learning to act despite the fear. Never let your fear prevent you, she said, from doing what you know is right. What is right? And knowing how to do what you know is right is courage and conscience and compassion and grace for the future of freedom. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in. God willing, I hope to see you tomorrow. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.